Sachin Chedda, and I'm the director of the Fair Elections Project, and it's my honor to welcome you here today to this rally for fair maps. We're here today because we're still energized, we're still excited, and we're still ready to get our democracy back. I'm going to be honest, maybe a little disappointed that the case will continue. We filed Gill v. Whitford in 2015. It was the second case challenging this map, and so this is a challenge that's been dragging on for the better part of a decade. And so we're a little disappointed because we're going to have another election under rigged maps, which means the people of Wisconsin won't be fairly represented again. But what's good is that we have yet another chance to introduce more evidence, to make the case, and hopefully not just fix the problem of excessive partisan gerrymandering for Wisconsin, but to fix it for the whole country. And so we're going to keep fighting in the courts to make a change. You guys with me? Now, beyond the court case, we have been fighting for years as a coalition, 13 members strong in the Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition, for legislation that would change the process. And so we're going to spend a lot of time from a bunch of different organizations and leaders today talking about our grassroots efforts to make change. And we're going to turn our attention, as the court case continues, as the lawyers and plaintiffs do their work, to the election that's going to happen this fall and getting candidates on the record for fair maps. And then we're going to turn our attention to the legislative session that starts in January. And we're going to demand that this legislature pass fair maps. And we're going to change it. So I want to start by reading a statement from our lead plaintiff in Gill v. Whitford, Bill Whitford. He really wishes he could have been here today. He's been caring for his grandchildren, and he's actually on a plane returning to Madison today. So here's a statement from Bill Whitford. This decision is neither a victory nor a defeat. It does mean delay, but it also provides a clear roadmap for what we have to show when we are next in court. And we are confident we will be back in the Supreme Court in the next term, and that the court will then have to reach the decision that they avoided taking yesterday. In the meantime, the citizens of Wisconsin will continue to press for legislative reform of the districting process. We have been very encouraged by overwhelming public support for reform. But now we have to get those gerrymandered protected legislators to act. And if they don't act, we will defeat them in the next election. We're pleased also to be joined by another of the plaintiffs, one of the citizens who stepped up to put their name on this lawsuit and who's carried the message all across Wisconsin and all across the country over the last few years. Our next speaker, Wendy Sue Johnson of Eau Claire.
Thank you, Sachin. It has really been a great honor to have my name included on this great effort. Bill Whitford called me out of the blue. I didn't know who he was and said, I'm going to send you this law review article, and would you put your name on this fight? And I guess I didn't understand why more people weren't willing to do that. I'm really grateful to the small group of people who decided that the lawsuit was a way to raise awareness. I'm really excited and grateful for the number of citizens who are following this case, and even more excited for the county board resolutions and the other public conversation that has been occurring in the last couple of years to really push our legislators to pass a nonpartisan process for the future. And when local Republican legislators come to the Eau Claire Chamber, for example, and tell us, well, we need to wait for the court, that's an excuse, and that's just wrong. They either don't know what they're talking about, or they're trying to avoid this topic, because no matter whether we have the maps for 18, which we know we won't have now, or new maps, fair maps for 2020, in 2021, there will be a process to redraw maps. And every single one of us needs to ask every single candidate and current legislator if they'll support bills like AB 44 and SB 13. So this case actually probably helped me find my voice. I thought I would run for public office someday. I had served on the school board in Eau Claire, and I, as a candidate in the 68th Assembly District this fall, I promise you that I will support AB 44 or its equivalent next session. And if I can take over the election committee that was currently held by Kathy Bernier, the Republican in the current 68th, if I can have her committee, I will promise to hold hearings so that the bill can move forward. Yeah! Just one last thought. The only way that the blue wave will become a tsunami is if we all jump in and force that to happen. Because according to the experts on both sides of the case, it is a very, very tough climb to actually gain control of either house. So we need the governor, we need to flip both houses, but we can only do it if every single person is making sure that the votes happen in November.
Wendy, Sue, thanks for your leadership. Thanks for putting your name out there. Thanks for stepping up to run. We have groups that are of all different backgrounds that are part of the Fair Maps Coalition. So some want a wave of voters, whoever you vote for. Some want a wave of voters for specific candidates and parties. But we stand together to say we want independent redistricting. And the leadership in this last session has come from Representative Don Verink and our next speaker, who's put forward the bill that will actually put power back in the hands of the people, and that's Senator Dave Hansen of Green Bay. Thank you.
You know, when this all started a few years ago and we started talking about fair maps, there wasn't a whole lot of interest. And here we are today with all this enthusiasm. And back in the day, when I was redistricted to the tune of 30,000 new constituents, a former state senator said to me, "You're done. You cannot win." Well, I'm still here, but it was a struggle. And this is something we truly, truly must fix. And growing up, we were all taught one thing, that every single vote counts. Yeah. But that is not always the case in states where politicians are responsible for drawing legislative district lines. Under the current process, many people think their vote matters, but in many legislative elections, the partisan advantage for one party or the other is so significant that voters practically forfeit their right to choose their legislators. And that is absolutely wrong. The role these illegal gerrymanders play in polarizing our legislature cannot be overstated. It is one of the main drivers of the extreme partisanship we have seen over the past several years, as politicians from both parties make decisions based more on avoiding losing in a primary election than they do about their chances in a general election. And we've seen it firsthand in Wisconsin, where our legislature, our people, and our politics are more divisive and polarized than ever. Given the opportunity to uphold earlier decisions that held that GOP's maps to be unconstitutional and establish a standard for redistricting that's fair to all voters, the U.S. Supreme Court sadly punted, chose instead to remand the case back to district court, ensuring that the problem of rigged elections will continue at least through the current election cycle. And again, that is absolutely wrong. The court's decision shows just how much work we all need to be done to restore fairness to our elections. It is time to pass real, nonpartisan redistricting law that will take the responsibility for drawing legislative district boundaries out of the hands of politicians in Madison and replace it with one that gives the voters a voice in the process and at the ballot box. And what they did in law offices outside of the Capitol with state computers and state employees that drew lines with no transparency was totally wrong, cost the state a lot of money, and it put us in this position where gerrymandering has taken over this state. We already know that nonpartisan redistricting can work because we see it in action in states as close as Iowa, which our plan is modeled after. Iowa, I think it's close to 40 years where it's worked very well, hasn't cost a lot of money or controversy, and it's a fair way of doing it, and that's why we're pushing forward with what we have. And nonpartisan redistricting not only takes the politics out of the map drawing process, it does far more than our current system to ensure open, fair, and competitive elections. In that model that we have, transparency is essential. Hearings around the state, including 2 outside of Madison, and no secretness where you have to sign an agreement if you've seen those maps, like the Republicans saw, that they couldn't tell anything about it. So absolutely wrong. And since they rigged the maps in 2011, Governor Walker and Republicans have refused to even give our Fair Maps bill a hearing, much less a vote. And their complete control of state government and the courts has led to disaster for our state. Some of the policies we're talking about in the legislature, where the majority rules, forcing every man, woman, and child to pay $500 to Foxconn, a foreign corporation, with absolutely a very poor track record when it comes to how they treat workers and, sadly, the environment, our air, land, and water. The ability they had to underfund our public schools to the point that in some cases, voters had to go to referendum to choose to raise their own taxes just to keep their lights on. And letting our roads, highways, and bridges fall into disrepair, making them less safety for our families and making our state very less competitive. It has been said we have the second worst roads and bridges in the country. That is absolutely wrong. Continuing policies that make our families pay more for their health insurance while denying coverage to thousands of Wisconsin residents. Putting the interest of corporate polluters before protecting our environment in a way that has endangered our drinking water and polluted our air. We cannot, because of all these things, we cannot give up on getting fair maps, fair elections, and a government that works for the people and not one party or special interest. And it's been said before, it is time to elect candidates who promise by November in the election to make passing nonpartisan redistrict reform and fair maps legislation their number one priority. SB 13 may have failed for now, but we will. And I intend to reintroduce our fair maps redistricting plan as soon as we come back in January. It's long overdue. It's time to take our democracy back. One person, one vote. Thank you. One person, one vote. One person, one vote. One person, one vote. One person, one vote.
Jay and Matt, you're buried back there, so why don't you start to make your way forward. Lindsay and Marla, you guys are married. Why don't you guys make your way forward? I want to acknowledge a few people who are here who are running for office and serving in office. We have the minority leader of the state assembly, Gordon Hintz, is here. He's very clear the Democratic caucus is going to be on board. We have a candidate for Secretary of State, Arvina Martin, who's here. We have a candidate for the state assembly, Jeff Wright. What district number? 51st Assembly. Are there any other candidates? 68. We spoke already. You missed it. All right.
State Assembly, District 77.
District 77. What's your name? I can't hear you. Shapna from District 77. Thank you so much. So our next speakers are going to be Lindsay Dorff from the Citizen Action Cooperative of Northeast Wisconsin and Marla Stevens from the Citizen Action Cooperative of Milwaukee. Both of you want to come up, and Felix Dorff is going to say some words as well, I think.
Hey, Felix.
All right, here we go. All right. Go ahead, Lindsay.
My name is Lindsay Dorff, and I'm the co-leader for Citizen Action Northeast Wisconsin's Fair Maps campaign. In January 2017, I saw my state senator, Dave Hansen, post on Facebook about his proposed bill for nonpartisan redistricting, and I felt in my gut that this, fair, independent election maps for Wisconsin, was the pivotal issue that could finally help our state begin to find itself again. To be clear, I don't have a poli-sci degree, and I don't usually gravitate to the super wonky political issues, but as a lifelong Wisconsinite who's lived in Green Bay, Madison, and Milwaukee, I do feel like I know Wisconsin and Wisconsin values. I used to associate my identity as a Wisconsinite with qualities like honesty, integrity, a sense of fair play, and a willingness to engage with everyone, even if we didn't always agree on everything. For example, my mom worked at the Packer Pro Shop when I was growing up, and she always made a point of asking fans from the opposing team if they had a good time at Lambeau Field. Without fail, they reported feeling welcome and having a great experience. And that's how I had always thought of Wisconsin. We might not always agree in our notoriously purple state, but we'd play the game right no matter who we were rooting for. Anyone who's been paying attention to Wisconsin politics lately could tell you that we have taken a drastic and tragic turn from fair and friendly competition, and our election maps are largely to blame. When our current maps were created behind closed doors, it wasn't simply a power move by Republicans to gain an advantage over Democrats. Much more importantly, they took the power away from the voters, the very citizens they had sworn to represent. And when voters no longer have the power to determine their representatives, the power shifts from the citizens, where it belongs, to the political parties and the donors who fund them. Our power, not good. Our power has shifted from the moderate, independent voters who used to keep our state on an even keel to political extremists. I don't want to turn Wisconsin into a permanent Democratic stronghold. I've dedicated my time and energy to this issue because I grew up taking pride in a Wisconsin where opposing sides could engage in civil discourse and compromise was considered a strength, not a dirty word. Just like my 4- and 6-year-old sons can understand fairness when they're playing soccer, I want them to expect honesty and fair play from their government. I want them to see their community members, regardless of political affiliation, as fellow Wisconsinites to work and move forward with, not opponents to be divided and conquered. Right. But as long as our election maps stay rigged, then political extremism, not democracy, will set the tone for Wisconsin. It's easy to get caught up in the details of a topic like gerrymandering, but ultimately it's really simple. Since America was born, its core belief has been that government works best when the citizens have a say in who runs it. As people, as citizens, and as Americans, we have a sacred right, a right people have sacrificed their lives for, to vote for who represents us, and those votes should count. Yeah. That is why fair maps matter. In Wisconsin, our election maps have been so horribly rigged that the people can no longer hold their representatives accountable. And you don't need to be a poli-sci major or a lawyer to understand that if our votes don't count, it's undemocratic, un-American, and just plain wrong. That's why hundreds of ordinary citizens like me have been showing up at town halls to learn about gerrymandering. That's why 39 county boards in Wisconsin, and many of those counties lean conservative, have passed resolutions asking for a nonpartisan map drawing process. That's why in April, an Outagamie County referendum in favor of fair maps passed with over 70% of the vote. We all understand that for democracy to work, we need to be able to hold our representatives accountable at the ballot box. Yes. Now, the Supreme Court has spoken, and it's clear that a judicial solution is going to take some additional time. But the good news is that, even more important than the Supreme Court justices, the people of Wisconsin are speaking out on partisan gerrymandering. And regardless of what the court did or didn't say, Wisconsinites are saying enough. We have suffered under rigged partisan maps for too long, and we deserve a fair, transparent, and nonpartisan process for drawing election maps so that Wisconsinites have the strong democracy and responsive representatives that we deserve. This problem could be fixed by the end of the month with good legislation based on the Iowa model. At yes, any time, with or without being forced by the Supreme Court, our legislators can choose to do their job and give Wisconsin a map drawing process that reflects the honesty, integrity, and good government that our state used to stand for.
Hi everybody. I'm Marla Stevens, and I am a member of the Milwaukee Organizing Co-op at Citizen Action Wisconsin, and I'm here for a lot of my colleagues. So we're a pretty radical group. At Citizen Action Wisconsin, we believe American democracy depends on fair, competitive elections. We take the nonpartisan, principled stance. Every person must have an equal say in what our government does. One person, one vote. We believe that the voters should choose their representatives and not the other way around. You heard from Senator Hansen what Gill v. Whitford is all about. And I'm a retired appeals lawyer. I could go into a complex legal analysis here. But you know what? I don't want to know how partisan can maps be. I want nonpartisan maps. It doesn't take a lawyer to know that our maps are rigged and our elections are unfair. We need change. We need fair maps. Here's the thing. We can anticipate what the partisan strategy is going to be going into the next election and the election after that. Win by any means necessary, be it voter suppression, dark money, attack ads, social media manipulation. Then gerrymander your districts to keep your legislative majority, and know that any court fix is going to be slow, and you can enjoy the spoils of your victory in the meantime. Right? Citizen Action says any partisanship is too much partisanship when it hinders the fairness of our elections. So, what do we want? We want our elected officials in Madison to create an independent, that means nonpartisan, and transparent, that means open to the public, redistricting process that's not only fair and impartial, but would cost the taxpayers far less and would put the people of Wisconsin back in power. And you know what? We have that in Senate Bill 13 and Assembly Bill 44. Thank you, So our Milwaukee co-op members have worked for the past 2 years to get these bills passed. We hosted more than a dozen town hall meetings in Racine, Sheboygan, Waukesha, Ozaki, Milwaukee, and Washington counties. We delivered more than 3,000 signatures on fair maps petitions to the legislature, demanding a hearing on Senator Hansen and Representative Ruink's bills. We worked in coalition with other groups and other co-ops here today to get fair maps resolutions passed. And as Lindsay told you, that happened in 39 of our 72 counties. That represents 2/3 of the population of the state of Wisconsin. 70% of these counties voted for Trump in the 2016 election. This is not a partisan issue. This is people all across the political spectrum want this. And if that wasn't enough, the Wisconsin Counties Association, at their meeting last fall, voted over 75% of the county executives are in support of nonpartisan redistricting. So, why do I say this? All right? The people of this state want nonpartisan redistricting. And we can hear them. And we asked the state legislature and Governor Walker, why can't you hear them? We understand no political party will surrender its control of the government and agree to create a nonpartisan redistricting process without intense pressure from us, from the people. But change is coming. We see it in Pennsylvania, where their state Supreme Court struck down partisan gerrymandering. We see it in Arizona and California, where they have set up reforms for independent commissions. We see it in Iowa, who has had nonpartisan civil servants drawing their maps for the last 3 censuses. We see a constitutional amendment in Ohio. We see ballot initiatives in Colorado and Michigan and Utah, and we're going to do it here too. So what are we going to do? How are we going to get it? We're going to call on our elected representatives to pass SB 14 and AB 44. Every one of us should be demanding that our current representatives call a special or an extraordinary session to pass these bills before the 2018 elections. Yeah. Before the 2020 elections. And before the next voting maps are drawn using the 2020 census data. So, what's the next thing we're going to do? We're going to make candidates take a pledge. There are candidates here today, they want your vote. What we need to do is tell them, you want our vote? You need to give us your vote. You need to pledge that you will pass nonpartisan redistricting. Ask them at every forum, ask them at every event, and talk about the issue for everyone else in the audience. And number 3, we got to vote in August and November for the candidates who've promised to do this. This is only the beginning of our movement for fair maps. We're going to continue to push for this until we get it. Thank you, everybody.
We clearly needed a bigger room. So I can't let this moment pass without acknowledging the issue that I think is dominating the news headlines across the country and across the state. And having these kids here on the floor and in Lindsay's arms just reminds us that our country, in its political weakness, in its inability to hold legislators and executives accountable, is now caging children and sending them to prison camps. And across the political spectrum, across the faith spectrum, across the country, people are standing up and saying, this is not who we are. We are better than this. We need a change, and the change starts with changing how we elect people and how we make sure that our political system works, and that's why we're standing up here today for fair maps.
Stand up!
One of the leaders of this movement, who's been working on this probably for decades, although I don't want to age him too much, is the leader of Common Cause in Wisconsin, and he's our next speaker, Jay Heck.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you for being here, and I'll be brief. If anyone, I suppose, could be discouraged or should be discouraged about the decision yesterday by the Supreme Court, it might be me. I've been at this for 22 years. But, I'm not. Just the opposite, in fact. But like Senator Hansen said, I can remember the days when no one had any idea what the word gerrymandering meant, and usually 2 or 3 sentences into explaining it, glazed eyes would appear and people would fall asleep. That is certainly not the case in Wisconsin today. Everybody knows what this cancer is. My organization does not endorse candidates for public office, but we endorse solid, good public policy that's good for citizens. And there's no question that nonpartisan gerrymander is needed more in Wisconsin, perhaps than in any other state. And, I've been here long enough to remember the last time the United States Supreme Court ruled on partisan gerrymandering. It was 12 years ago, and it was a case brought by Pennsylvania to the United States Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court ruled very narrowly that partisan gerrymandering is okay. It's a political exercise. Partisans are part of the political process. Those are the folks who should prevail. It was a 5-4 decision. It was very narrow. But that's not what the Supreme Court decided yesterday. They, in fact, said, almost all of them said, that this is very much a live issue. This is very much an issue still in play. And what they said instead was that Wisconsin, we understand the problem about gerrymandering. We're just not sure about the way that they brought it. The plaintiffs brought a statewide complaint against it. What we would like to see is a district-by-district harming of citizens. And I can tell you that every citizen in every district in Wisconsin has been harmed by this method. Yes. I can tell you that the $3.5 million of your tax money that has gone to support uncompetitive gerrymandered maps is not in your public interest. That harms you. I can tell you that the secrecy with which the 2011 process was undertaken, with deliberate contempt for citizens of this state to keep them out of the process and to make sure only the legislative leadership knew what the lines were going to look like, that is affected every citizen of the state. And it goes on and on. The voter suppression that has resulted from a gerrymander legislature affects every voter in this state. And we don't have to go very far to see that I don't think it should be too difficult. Now, I don't know what the lawyers are going to say, but we should be able to demonstrate that there has been harm district by district in every legislative and congressional district in Wisconsin. I'm confident that the attorneys, when they go back, and we do have another chance, by the way, will be able to demonstrate this. And you know, it's not just in Wisconsin. There's another case that is even better tailored for what the Supreme Court said they wanted, coming out of North Carolina, that may have oral arguments before the United States Supreme Court as soon as this September or this October when they go back. And the case in Maryland hasn't been taken to court yet. So this isn't the end of the process. This is the beginning of the process. And let me just say finally that the Iowa model, again, back in 2003, I remember going in to see Senator Dave Hansen to talk about how we can get nonpartisan maps accomplished in this state. And the great thing back then is there was bipartisan support for this. He teamed up with Senator Sheila Harsdorf, then Senator Sheila Harsdorf. There were Republicans who knew that this was the right thing to do. They knew that nonpartisan gerrymandering was the way to go, because not only was it good for the people of Wisconsin, it was also good for them. It was good politics. And all you need to do, is, as has been said, is look to Iowa. In 1980, a Republican governor, a Republican legislature passed and enacted into law the Iowa process, which is nonpartisan. Why did they do it? Because they had the interests of the citizens of Iowa in mind. Their selfish, partisan considerations were put aside for the people of Iowa. And that is what Republicans, as well as Democrats in the state of Wisconsin, need to do. They need to do this for us, the citizens of Wisconsin.
Jay, thank you so much for your leadership of Common Cause and of the Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition. To emphasize the bipartisan nature of this, there were two special elections a couple of weeks ago. And in one election, a Republican won, and in one election, a Democrat won. And the line that holds them together is both of those candidates who won endorsed nonpartisan redistricting reform as a key part of their platform. We can make this an issue that gains the endorsements of the people. We have two more speakers, and we'll get you out of here on time at 12:45. The next speaker has been a stalwart leader of holding both parties accountable, of making sure that our system is less corrupt. And frankly, he does a ton of unheralded work behind the scenes to make our democracy movement work. The leader of the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, Matt Ross.
Thank you, Sachin. I want to thank the Wisconsin Fair Maps Project, the Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition, all our coalition partners. I want to thank the lawyers and the plaintiffs who worked so hard on this case. I want to thank Dave Hansen, Senator Dave Hansen, for his tremendous leadership on this issue for many years. Most of all, I want to thank all of you who came today. 150 people or more at a moment's notice, less than 24 hours actually showing up here for this event is a testament. You are a testament to how this issue has taken off. People understand the issue of rigged maps now in a way that they didn't 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even a year ago. That's why of those 39 county boards that have passed through a resolution saying to this state legislature, change the way you do the maps, ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin, give us fair maps. Of those 39 counties, 31 have passed it in the last 18 months alone. So this is a dramatic surge. This mass movement is growing. We don't need to wait for the courts. We don't need to wait for the lower court. We don't need to wait for the U.S. Supreme Court. All we need to do is express our voices as loudly as we can to the people who are running for office in November right here in Wisconsin and demand of each and every one of them that they sign that pledge to give us fair maps here in Wisconsin. And we not only need fair maps as the end product, we need fair maps procedurally. We need a democratic, open, transparent process. Other speakers have mentioned it. I'm going to mention it again. How they did this horrible rigging of our maps in 2011. It's the people's business. It's their constitutional duty to draw maps after the census. Did they do the people's business in this building, the people's building? No. They scurried across the street to the glass bank and the private cushy law offices of Michael Best and Friedrich, went into a room that became known as the map room. And the map room was a locked map room. And the public, you were not allowed into the locked map room. The media, you weren't allowed into the locked map room. Democrats surely weren't allowed into the locked map room. And Republican elected officials, legislators here who were not in leadership, weren't allowed into the locked map room unless they got permission from one of the young aides who held the keys to the locked map room. Once they got to go into the locked map room, they couldn't look at the statewide map. They could only look at their own redistricted district. And before they were allowed to leave the locked map room, they had to sign an oath of secrecy. You know, that's not how democracy is supposed to work. And I happened to be in the courtroom at the Blue Federal Building here in Madison when this great court case was brought and won at that level. And I heard Attorney General Schimmel's deputy give a closing argument, and basically this is what he said. This is how democracy works. We win, we get to rig the maps. That was their argument. We need to tell them that is not how democracy works. So I just urge you to demand of every single person, of every party who's running, that they sign this pledge. This is not about party. This isn't even about ideology. It's about simple, basic fairness. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matt. We have so many great coalition members. In the last 24 hours since the court decision, we've had people coming out of the woodwork saying they want to help, they want to participate. If your organization wants to become a member of the Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition, come find me. It's very simple. It doesn't cost anything, but you add your voice to ours. And one of the organizations that's really been at the top of leading for a fair democracy and an open, transparent democracy is the League of Women Voters. We're joined now by Ellen Penwell of the League of Women Voters. Ellen, where are you?
Actually, it's actually going to be me here.
Deborah's here. There we go. Deborah. All right.
Good afternoon.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Deborah Cronmiller. I have the privilege of serving as the president of the League of Women Voters of the state of Wisconsin. The Supreme Court did not give us the ruling we had hoped against extreme partisan gerrymandering in Wisconsin with yesterday's Gill versus Whitford ruling. As the League of Women Voters explained in our amicus brief in this case, the Wisconsin maps deny many Wisconsin citizens the full power of the vote and should be redrawn. However, the court ruling allows the plaintiffs a chance to demonstrate this in further legal proceedings, and we remain optimistic. More important, the League believes the current redistricting process protects the party in power, whichever party it is, and it is not open and transparent. It is not carried out in the interest of the voters. But Wisconsin can still right the wrong. So far, 39 of 72 Wisconsin counties have passed resolutions in support of a nonpartisan redistricting process. Lawmakers in the Wisconsin Capitol need to be accountable to voters to support this legislation that will take the power of map drawing out of partisan control and give it to an independent body with plenty of public input in the interest of fairness and democracy. Wisconsin voters are demanding this reform, and the League of Women Voters will continue to advocate for a nonpartisan redistricting process. Wisconsin voters need and deserve fair maps.
Thanks to the dozens of people back there, the dozens of people here. Together, we're going to get fair maps for all of Wisconsin and for all of the country. Thank you very much.